Hi folks, in this video we're going to be looking at how to paint urban rubble bases, and to do this I'm using a 60mm pre-sculpted resin base from Unreal Wargaming. But you could do this to any base that's had cork and bits of slate and sand applied to it. The technique stays the same. I just happen to really like these resin bases as it saves a lot of time on the sculpting nature. So without any further ado, let's cue the music. To start out with, I will be taking some mechanicus standard grey from Games Workshop, and with your favourite cheap base coating brush, thin the mechanicus standard grey down with water and just slap it on all over our primed base. As for primer colour, I'd recommend doing this over a grey or a black primer. Try not to use a light primer for this. If we do it as a black primer, then it will aid us with shadows if we miss anything, and if we miss anything with a grey primer, then it will just add some tonal variations with any areas that we miss with our mechanicus standard grey. So there's no real secret to this, it's just a matter of thinning this down with a little bit of water and slapping on a nice even base coat all over the base. The next step is the really fun step. Once this base coat is dried, we're going to come in with all of our favourite coloured washes. These can be your blues, your reds, your greens, your yellows, your sepias, all of your colours that basically aren't a black. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our washes and randomly splodge bits of colour over all of our texture. So this is our little bits of rubble, our big bits of rubble, doesn't matter what it is. We're going to get a brush a little bit damp from our water pot, dip it into our wash and start slathering it on. And the idea with these is we're going to mix these colours together so there's no stark edges. We're going to allow this to stain and pool and create an absolute cacophony of colours all over the base itself. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It doesn't matter how many different colour washes you use. I think I used 3 or 4 on this, but the more you have, the more variations you're going to get in your underlying colours through your highlighting stages. The really important thing is to make sure that you give this plenty of time to dry before we move on to any other step. Otherwise, it will start to get in the way and be counterproductive. Once the washes are dry, we can now come in with various dry brushes to return the grey colouring back to the base. So to start off with, I'm going to come back in with the original mechanicus standard grey and do an all-over dry brush all over this base. Now I'm looking to overbrush this almost as much as dry brush, and I'm still trying to retain some of that colouring in the shadows, the recesses, but any like major flat areas we're still looking to use this dry brush to get the grey tones back into the base. We still want to have some of that colour showing through. It's very important to try not to dry brush so much that you'll lose the colouring out of it. We want to use this to maintain some interest and variations in the grey. Next we're going to come in with some dawnstone, and we're going to dry brush highlight this further up, focusing on some of these larger, bigger, flatter clumps of stone and rocks, and picking out some of the more raised areas on the fallen rubble in the centre of this base. Again, it's really important that we don't try and lose the blues, greens, sepias, reds, tones that we've achieved from the washes in this step. For the final grey highlight, I'm coming in with a soft dry brush of Celeste Grey from Games Workshop, and with this I'm going to be picking out sort of the more prominent details, the highest points where the light would hit, and doing a bit of stippling onto these rocks to soft blend this in. And as you can see, this is allowing all of our edges, our details and stuff to pop. We're getting a nice transition within grey tones, but we've also got that colour shining through, which is making our grey a lot more interesting and less just, oh, a black to white gradient. And here we have the base once the dry brushes have been complete. As you can see, we've still got that colour shining through, making the greys a lot more interesting tonally. With the grey areas now complete on this base, we can start looking at any of the other details. Now on this base there is a fallen piece of iron support girder, and I'm going to be painting that heavily rusted. So to start out, you'll need to paint this in your favourite dark brown colour. For me, I've used Rhinox Hide from Games Workshop here, and there's no real secret. Here we are just putting down a base coat. We are just thinning down this little bit of water to ensure that it flows nicely off the brush, and we're going to be making sure that we are careful not to touch the grey, but we are just going to very carefully go over and cover all the areas that we're going to want to be this rusty iron. On this base it's just this single piece, but you may find that other bases may vary in your mileage. Once the Rhinox Hide is dry, I'm coming in with some Mornfang Brown from Games Workshop, and I'm going to be painting most of the raised areas on the bit of iron. I'm being quite rough with this, preparing to leave the odd gap on raised surfaces and definitely leaving the Rhinox Hide into the recesses. I'm making sure to keep this paint a little bit wetter than normal, as this means it'll dry a little bit patchy, and we kind of want this. This will show some uneven rust developments rather than a nice smooth layering upon this piece of iron. And when it comes to the sides, with the paint a little bit wetter than normal, I'm going to be sort of sketching in, pulling upwards to either the top of the girder or towards the front. And this will dry kind of semi-transparent, but still kind of mostly covering this colouring. We're looking for this to be quite orange and rusty, and this is going to really work in our favour for this. There's no right or wrong amount that you can do for this, it's just a matter of layering in some of that brown colour to leave the Rhinox Hide in the shadows and give us a nice impression of heavy rust. Next we're going to do exactly the same thing but with Scrag Brown from Games Workshop. And I'm going straight from the pot with this, as I want to be very controlling with this paint, and I don't mind it being a little thicker. And I'm doing some sketchy like single pass splotches and areas where the rust has really got to its heaviest concentration. So I'm just working it a little into selected areas, being a little random, not being too precise where I put this, just sort of sketching in a few little bits here and there. I've put a bit onto the palette to control it when I'm doing the sides, but when I was just doing the top, it was just tapping the side of the brush in a random motion onto the flat surfaces to give the impression of that really oranged rust tone. The last step in this rusty I-beam is to take your favourite bright silver and pick out the edges on the very raised and zenithal edges and do some dots and scratches onto the sides to show where bits of the rust would have been chipped off, revealing the silver steel underneath. With all of the painting done, we can now look at doing some pigments onto the base. This is going to add a nice dusty effect and make this look like this is a fresh battle scene rather than a painted model. So here I've taken a bone coloured pigment, taken a old knackered cheap pound shop brush, and I'm dipping into the pigment, bashing most of it off on the side of the pot, and then smushing it into areas on the base that I want to have this light coloured dusty effect. You might want to blow this off every now and then to get the effect that you want, and make sure that it's not too much resting on the surface, but you really want to smush it in between these nooks and crannies. It can be quite difficult for it to stay in those sort of crevices. You see as I blow off there, a lot of it disappears, but it's very good at giving a nice sort of filter on the flatter surfaces. Once we're happy with the amount of bone coloured pigment onto the ruined base, I'm then coming in with a rust coloured pigment, and once again I am really smushing this into all the nooks and crannies and areas that want to have this sort of reddy brown dust colour. We're looking to give this the impression like some facing brick has exploded and there's shards and dust of that orangey red brick lying everywhere over the more elaborate marble details and more fancy columns that you see on these bases. It's just a matter of really smushing it in, and the nice thing about the pigments is that you can blend the two together. There's no right or wrong place to put this stuff. Just make sure that you really smush it in and blow off any excess. And here we have the finished base. The wash colours are giving a nice interesting tone to our greys, and the orange and bone pigments really draw the eye in. I've painted the rim black to allow all of the colours to pop, and this is a perfect base for putting something like a dreadnought on, but this can be applied to any smaller base from this range. If you like this video, why not consider subscribing? It's free of charge, it helps me out, and you get further videos like this one in your YouTube feed. So, till next time folks.